Phew. Entering through the door, Inseop sighed. His right hand was wrapped in a white bandage, but it didn't hinder his movement. Dragged by Li Wuyan to a nearby hospital to get his wound treated, Inseop was forcibly sent home. Despite insisting that he could drive himself, Li Wuyan ignored him. Claiming that since he did Inseop a favor, Inseop should do him a favor too, he pushed Inseop out. Li Wuyan even postponed his interview and personally drove Inseop home, leaving with a satisfied smile. "Hello, Kate." Inseop spoke to the potted plants by the window as he took off his coat. He didn't want to leave anyone behind in Korea, where he would leave after achieving his goal. However, the solitude in the rooftop room was hard to bear for someone as lonely as he was. He wanted to raise something due to his loneliness but didn't have much time at home, so he came up with the idea of keeping plants. As soon as he finished unpacking, he went to the local flower shop. There, the mimosa caught his eye. The way its leaves shrank when touched made it seem more like an animal than a plant. The florist told him that the mimosa is also called the sensitive plant, adding that the way its leaves fold up at a touch symbolizes a sensitive and delicate person. Inseop brought the plant home carefully and named it Kate that very day. On sunny days, he always placed it outside, and on cold days, he brought it inside. He meticulously recorded the watering schedule and checked its condition. Every night, he would touch Kate's leaves with his hand. Watching the leaves fold with a rustling sound comforted him, making him feel he was not alone. To Inseop, Kate was the only confidant he had in Korea. "I got hurt." He showed his hand to Kate, muttering to himself. "So I got sent home early, I don't feel great." He wanted to touch Kate but restricted himself to only once a day before bed. The florist had warned him that touching the leaves too often, even for fun, would stress the plant and cause it to die. Sitting on the floor, he started lamenting. "I feel like I can't do anything right, Kate." Others might call him crazy, but he desperately needed someone to talk to. The taciturn and diligent Choi Inseop, working quietly by Li Wuyan's side, wasn't his true self. The whiny, lonely Peter, who liked talking to people and often cried, could only exist within the closed doors of his rooftop room. "I don't have time. And I keep making mistakes." Li Wuyan, "No, Philip, I'm going crazy. Nothing's going right. Jenny, I'm sorry. I don't know what I'm doing right now." Inseop covered his face with both hands. Tears flowed. He felt ashamed. Just mentioning Jenny's name filled his throat with suppressed guilt and shame, making it hard to breathe. He sat on the floor and cried for a long time. Crying didn't dilute the guilt, but he couldn't help it. After crying until he was parched, Inseop got up. He took a bottle of water from the fridge and drank it. Even while drinking, tears kept flowing. He wiped his tears roughly with his palm and changed his clothes. Checking his phone, he found 2 messages. One was from an unknown number. Checking the message, he found it was from the reporter who had given him her number earlier. "It's you, Nariam. Looking forward to working with you." He hesitated to reply and then decided against it. He saw no need to contact her unless it was for work. The other message was from Li Wuyan. "Rest today. Shooting starts tomorrow." It was the first time Li Wuyan had sent him a message. Just reading the short sentence made his heart race. Inseop buried his face in the pillow, silently screaming until he was out of breath. "It's hard." Lifting his face from the pillow, he murmured quietly. When he decided to come to Korea, his whole family opposed it. They couldn't send him alone to a foreign country where he knew no one, especially given his weak health. He hadn't stubbornly insisted without reason. He knew that no amount of talking would be of any use. So he started working. He took any job he could find, from washing dishes to cleaning restaurants, starting at dawn. In his spare time, he studied Korean and exercised regularly. It took him a year to save up the amount he had planned. He knelt before his father, holding the bank book containing all his savings, and once again spoke about going to Korea. His father, seeing the calluses on his son's hands, nodded. But there were conditions: a 1-year limit, contacting home every 3 days, sending emails if calls were impossible, getting regular checkups at the hospital once a month, and sending the results. If he wrote about the hardships he faced in Korea, 10 notebooks wouldn't suffice. He had actually written 13 notebooks filled with test-aim diaries. That's how he got to his current position. Compared to the time when he stalked Lee Woo-yeon like a stalker, gathering information, the situation was much better now. But it was still hard. Physically, he was fine, but the mental strain was indescribable. Being someone who exaggerated and got scared easily but couldn't show it outwardly, he felt like dying. When he hurt his hand today, he almost fainted at the sight of the blood. He barely managed to find a handkerchief to wrap the wound, but seeing the torn flesh again nearly made him vomit up his morning sandwich. It's hard. I feel like dying. I'm lonely. I miss Mom, Will, Grandma, Mary, and Nicholas. I want to go home. I'm sick of Paris baguette sandwiches. The obsessive fans are scary. I'm lonely. Hugging the pillow, he whined. Since no one could see him, he wanted to be as weak as he could when he was alone. Philip, I hate Lee Woo-yeon. I hate him. I hate him. I will hate him. I hate him. He's a bad guy. A bad guy. A bad guy. Lying on one cheek, he muttered monotonously. The words piled up in his mind like a magical incantation. After repeating "bad guy" and "hate" about 100 times, In-seop's phone rang. Choi In-seop sprang to his feet and picked up his phone. It was CEO Kim. Hello, CEO. This is Choi In-seop. Returning to his mature manager persona, he knelt and started the call. In-seop, where are you? Aren't you with Lee Woo-yeon? In-seop hesitated. Should he tell him about the weird fan that caused his injury, or should he make something up? I'm at home. I had an urgent matter, so I came home first. He explained his situation with words that were neither a lie nor the truth. I thought so. Chief CHA was suddenly called. Lee Woo-yeon asked him to drive for him urgently today. Chief CHA. Yes. Lee Woo-yeon suddenly called him, saying he needed someone to drive today. I was wondering why. The only thing Lee Woo-yeon asked was not to mention his injury. Strictly speaking, it wasn't a lie. I apologize. I'll go back out immediately. No, it's fine. Let Chief CHA handle it for today. No, I'll go out immediately. In-seop picked up his discarded clothes. Lee Woo-yeon said if you didn't come, he'd use Chief CHA as his permanent manager. Just rest at home today. I was just curious about what was going on. Thinking of Chief CHA's face, who often looked exhausted after working with Lee Woo-yeon, In-seop felt bitter. He didn't want to get attached, but he didn't want to cause trouble either. I'm sorry. Because of me. It's fine. Besides, oh, haha. Can you stop by the office tonight? Yes. What time should I come? Around 9. Chief CHA should be free by then. In-seop picked up a pen and wrote 9 p.m. office in his notebook. He felt secure only when he wrote everything down, even if he wouldn't forget. Yes. I'll be there by then. No. Just be there at 9 exactly. Got it? Yes. I'll be there exactly at 9. All right. Take care. The call ended. In-seop placed his phone back on the desk and hugged his pillow. I don't want to go. Though In-seop answered professionally, saying he would come without questioning, his true feelings were different. He wanted to rest at home today. His injured hand hurt, and his mind was exhausted. He was eager to finish the novel he had started earlier and end his day quietly. No, I need to pull myself together. He stood up and slapped his cheeks with both hands. He remembered hearing that mastering pain was a Buddhist practice. God, I'm sorry. While I'm in Korea, I'll live like a Buddhist. Just as the stinging pain on his cheeks began to fade, he felt his resolve weaken again. Inseop slapped his cheeks again with his palms. Wishing he could become numb to pain, both physically and emotionally, Inseop stared at himself in the mirror. Inseop. Startled by the eerie voice calling his name from behind, Inseop turned around to see Chief Cha, who had been smoking, approaching with a frown. Inseop quickly hid his bandaged hand in his pocket. Chief, today. Did you finish your urgent business? Yes. I'm sorry. Though he didn't want to cause trouble, Inseop found himself in a situation where he couldn't avoid it anymore. It's fine. But I hope there won't be any more urgent matters in the future. Yes, I understand. Today, just for today. Chief Cha placed his hand on Inseop's shoulder. The strong smell of cigarettes made Inseop want to cough, but he held back, trying to act maturely. Even after they entered the elevator, Chief Cha didn't let go of his shoulder. As Inseop pondered when would be a natural time to remove his hand, the elevator stopped at the office on the 9th floor. The office lights were all off. Inseop looked at Chief Cha in surprise. Has the CEO left for the day? What? He said he'd wait here. He definitely told me to be here by 9. Just then, the office lights turned on and fireworks went off everywhere. Surprise. Did we scare you? Ah. Inseop screamed and clung to Chief Cha. As the people hidden around the office belatedly set off fireworks, Inseop screamed even louder and clung to Chief Cha's neck. Inseop, hey, Inseop. The more Chief Cha tried to pry the terrified Inseop off, the tighter Inseop held on. CEO Kim, who was carrying a cake with lit candles, started singing a birthday song obliviously. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Inseop. Happy birthday to you. Everyone clapped and cheered. Inseop, still in shock, couldn't even lift his head. His heart raced, making his vision blurry. Inseop, what are you doing? The cake is heavy. When CEO Kim called his name, Chief Cha forcibly removed Inseop's arms from around his neck. Inseop, why are you so startled? Ah. It's your birthday. You should have expected a party. With Chief Cha's teasing, Inseop realized that today was the birthday of Choi Inseop, the name he was borrowing. He also understood why Chief Cha had volunteered to be Lee Woo-yeon's manager today without any complaints. Make a wish. CEO Kim held the cake out to Inseop. Everyone in the office clapped and chanted Inseop's name, urging him to blow out the candles. Congratulations, Inseop. Happy birthday. Congrats on your discharge. Do well from now on. Blow out the candles quickly. Make a wish. Choi Inseop felt like crying. He didn't feel worthy of such treatment. Yet, the kindness of others was so touching it brought him to tears. Fearing that someone might see his tearful eyes, Inseop quickly blew out the candles. Before anyone could turn the lights back on, he opened his mouth. Excuse me. Huh? What? Are you moved? Do you feel like working here forever now? CEO Kim joked, but Choi Inseop forced himself to say the opposite of what he felt. I find this overwhelming. What? I don't like this kind of thing. So, please don't do this again. Knowing he wouldn't get another chance to have his birthday celebrated by the office, Inseop deliberately said harsh words. The sudden awkward silence left everyone speechless. Inseop excused himself and left the office. As he waited for the elevator, he felt tears streaming down his cheeks. He heard Chief Cha calling him from behind. Instead of waiting for the elevator, Inseop ran towards the emergency stairs. Fearing that Chief Cha would catch up to him, he ran up the stairs instead. Reaching the rooftop, he opened the door and burst into tears. Ua. Even now, he wanted to go back to the office and thank everyone, shake their hands, and say how grateful he was. He wanted to say how much he appreciated their kindness and hoped they would continue to treat him well. He wanted to be friends with them, watch movies together on days off, and have someone to call when he felt lonely. He wanted to ask them to be those friends. He wanted to pour out his heart and maintain a friendly relationship. But he knew those were luxuries he couldn't afford. He had come to this place to betray not only Li Wuyan but also everyone working with him. He couldn't act childishly. He had to behave maturely. But keeping that line was incredibly hard. Choi In-seop covered his face with his hands and sobbed. Ua. Ua ak. Wiping his tears, he stumbled backward in shock. A man leaning on the rooftop railing, smoking, was watching him with interest. The overwhelming sense of humiliation made him bite his lip, but the tears didn't stop. Li Wuyan, extinguishing his cigarette, started walking toward In-seop. Startled by Li Wuyan's approach, In-seop, still on the ground, moved backward. Why are you here? Why aren't you at home? In-seop nodded instead of answering. Tears continued to wet his collar. He needed to stop crying, but he was too surprised to do so. Chief Cha said he had something to do here for a bit. He said it would only take 10 minutes. In-seop was well aware that Li Wuyan hated driving himself. Though he didn't know the exact reason, it was surprising and bewildering that Li Wuyan had driven him home today. There are too many eyes downstairs, so I often smoke here. Yes. In-seop could only blame himself for overlooking the fact that the office was on the way to Li Wuyan's home. He felt mortified that someone like Li Wuyan had caught him in such an undignified moment. Why are you crying? Li Wuyan squatted in front of In-seop, bringing his face close to his and asked. Why are you crying like that? I'm sorry. Apart from apologizing, he couldn't think of anything else to say. Why are you apologizing? I'm just curious why you're crying. It was a question stemming from pure curiosity, devoid of any concern or sympathy. The sight of the usually quiet and diligent manager crying like a child and rushing up to the rooftop had added yet another question mark in Li Wuyan's mind. Why is this guy acting like this? Li Wuyan tilted his head slightly and asked again. Why are you crying like that? The words "like a fool" were hidden within his smile. Choi In-seop desperately racked his brain for a valid reason to justify his tears. What should he say? What should he say to maintain the image of a calm and mature manager? After struggling, In-seop thought of the surprise party earlier. I was moved and cried. Excuse me. I was so moved by the birthday party you prepared for me that I cried. It wasn't entirely untrue. If he analyzed his tears, they were composed of 20% emotion, 70% guilt, and 10% self-pity. Is today your birthday? Yes. Why didn't you say anything? He couldn't say that he hadn't even thought about his official birthday until CEO Kim wished him a happy birthday with a cake. So, he just mumbled, just because. Were you so moved by the party that you came up here to cry? It's usually polite to pretend not to see an adult man crying so loudly. In-seop couldn't understand Li Wuyan's intentions in repeatedly confirming that he had cried like a child. Yes. I was moved. But for now, all he could do was lie down and respond like this. You were that moved? Yes. Is being kind your ideal type? What? Yes. He couldn't understand why that question came up, but he answered anyway. A low chuckle from Li Wuyan came from above his head. Sometimes easy, sometimes hard. I just can't figure it out. The one who couldn't figure things out was In-seop. He didn't understand why Li Wuyan was laughing or what he meant by easy or hard. So if I'm kind to you, will you cry like that behind my back? That's. Will you cry more? No. That's not the case. He didn't want to trouble anyone while working, even if that person was his target for revenge, Li Wuyan. He planned to work as hard as he could and get fired gloriously. I won't cry. Today, I was just surprised and tears came out suddenly. You don't need to worry. Hearing Inseop's answer, a faint look of disappointment flashed across Li Wuyan's face. Like a snowflake melting on a hearth, the disappointment quickly dissolved into his dark eyes. I'm really worried. Just as Inseop was about to tell him not to worry, CEO Kim opened the rooftop door and came up. Inseop. CEO. Fearing that CEO Kim would notice his tears, Inseop quickly turned his head and wiped his face with his palm. Why did you make my manager cry? But Li Wuyan's words made it all for naught. Crying? Inseop cried. Yes. Li Wuyan added with a laugh, cried hard. If Inseop could fly, he would have jumped off the roof right then. Cried hard. Why? Not angry. Why would he be angry? Well, he stormed out saying he felt burdened by the party. I thought he was mad about being called out for this. He said he cried because he was moved. Inseop's face turned red like someone drunk. He realized that trying to maintain a professional demeanor was useless in this situation. But he couldn't reveal his true feelings either. Were you really moved? I thought you were mad for being called out. As CEO Kim looked relieved, Inseop felt even more sorry. When he bowed his head, saying he was sorry, CEO Kim laughed heartily. It's fine. If that's the case, let's go back and finish the birthday party. It was the worst. Having refused the party like a cold city man, he now had to go back with swollen eyes. I thought you were tough, but you have a soft heart. Crying over a birthday party. Were you that grateful? Yes. Since he was genuinely grateful, he answered honestly. If you're grateful, you should do well from now on. Right? Yes, I'll do well. Satisfied with Inseop's compliant answer, CEO Kim laughed. Li Wuyan saw through CEO Kim's shallow scheme to bind Inseop to his side. Only his fool of a manager, bowing and scraping, seemed unaware. Really incomprehensible. When he thought he was transparent, his actions were hard to understand. When he thought he was hard to understand, he acted surprisingly simple. Li Wuyan, are you going back to the office? CEO Kim hesitated, his question filled with the hope that he would not. Li Wuyan smiled. A perfectly proper smile. CEO Kim thought of the past when he had been deceived by that smile. His chest ached. He remembered Chief CHA's drunken rants calling Li Wuyan's smile a national scam. Even if he pretended to be polite and kind, Li Wuyan was fundamentally a dirty jerk. He wasn't someone who would spend his time for his manager. And that's not what CEO Kim wanted either. He didn't want to see Li Wuyan's mood dampen the party. Why ask the obvious? Ha ha. Right. Right. Asking is a waste of breath. There's no way you'd go to a manager's birthday party. Of course, I'll go. What? It's my manager's birthday. Why ask the obvious? Choi In-seop's face turned complicated. He couldn't believe the obvious truth. Li Wuyan put his arm around In-seop's shoulders, blocking his words. Let's go down, CEO. In-seop, looking glum, was dragged down the stairs by Li Wuyan. CEO Kim quietly took out his phone. It was time to deliver the bad news to Chief CHA, who had promised to be right back after dropping off Li Wuyan. Are you okay? Yes. I'm fine. Choi In-seop, who was walking ahead, stopped to lean against the wall and gagged for a while before continuing. He had ended up like that after accepting drinks from people at the party, unable to refuse. He had stubbornly refused both the taxi ride and the offer to be taken home. He just kept repeating that he was fine, insisting he could walk to his place, though his speech was slurred. For the first time today, Li Wuyan, who had driven Inseop home, knew that what he said wasn't entirely wrong. Inseop's place was midway between the office and Li Wuyan's home, within walking distance. Oh. Of course, that was while he was still somewhat sane. Inseop repeated walking and leaning against the wall until he finally collapsed onto the ground. Li Wuyan, with his hands in his pockets, glanced at Inseop with a look of annoyance. Regardless of how late at night it was rare for Li Wuyan to walk home. However, the company party had everyone heavily intoxicated. As soon as the party started, Chief CHA had grabbed a bottle of wine and began drinking straight from it, clearly showing he had no intention of being Li Wuyan's driver. Other employees also drank joyfully when Inseop returned. Even the usually somber CEO Kim had poured a few glasses of wine for Li Wuyan. Ultimately, there was no one left to take Li Wuyan home. Since he never called for a designated driver, he ended up walking with Inseop. Oh, I feel dizzy. What? I feel dizzy, Inseop mumbled with his head down. Get up. It's still too cold to sleep outside. Yes. Despite responding, Inseop made no move to get up. Are you going to stay here? Yes. Then I'll go first. Yes. Goodbye. Before finishing his farewell, Inseop's body slid down the wall. Li Wuyan took out his phone to check the weather. -3 degrees. It wasn't cold enough to freeze to death overnight. Li Wuyan started walking, leaving the lying Inseop behind. The chilly night air quickened the pace of the passers-by. Despite pulling his hat low and covering half his face with a scarf, some people turned their heads to look at him. However, no one stopped to talk to him. Yet, Li Wuyan stopped in the middle of the street. After a moment of thought, he turned back. Inseop was still lying in the same position as before. Get up. His words had no effect. Inseop either fell into a deep sleep or refused to respond. The only sounds now were the occasional passing cars. Li Wuyan nudged Inseop's shoulder with his foot. Inseop grimaced slightly but showed no sign of getting up. Li Wuyan pressed his shoulder harder with his foot, shaking him gently. It was useless. If he left Inseop like this, it would undoubtedly affect the schedule tomorrow morning. The drama shoot was starting and preparations needed to begin early. If Inseop didn't show up, it would be a perfect excuse to fire him. It was a great opportunity. If it were any other manager, Li Wuyan would have already done it without hesitation. Li Wuyan stared at Inseop's face as he lay on the ground. Such a youthful face. He could still be mistaken for a student. His skinny body seemed ill-suited to the suit he wore. It was surprising how he managed to handle all his duties with that frail body. What on earth are you doing? Life was full of incomprehensible things. Realizing this early, Li Wuyan had learned to live deceiving those around him appropriately. He understood that it was a waste of time to agonize over things he couldn't understand. But this was different. Even while lying in his hospital bed, he couldn't stop wondering why Choi Inseop had done what he did. When he came to his senses, he found himself looking at the sleeping Inseop in the next room. Not that it brought any answers. Li Wuyan nudged the sleeping Inseop with his foot again. When he kicked harder, Inseop grimaced and lifted his head. Get up. This time, if he didn't listen, Li Wuyan resolved to leave him to freeze. He was that kind of person. But he might have done it if Inseop hadn't started crying and clinging to his pant leg. Even Li Wuyan, with his unusual emotional range, couldn't help but feel a little flustered in this situation. While he debated whether to shake him off, Inseop blinked his large eyes and spoke. Don't go, Jenny. He thought Inseop was a loner, but it seemed he had a girlfriend. And a foreigner at that. Inseop clung to his leg more tightly, mumbling the name Jenny several more times. Damn, who's Jenny? Li Wuyan grabbed Inseop's shoulders and shook him roughly. Hey. Choi Inseop. Do you have any friends to call? Insiep, barely able to open his eyes, laughed faintly. Do you have any friends? No. Not even one. Yeah. Not a single one. I don't need them. Before he could chastise him for speaking informally, Li Wuyan bent down and pulled Insiep's phone from his pocket. He intended to find Jenny's number and tell her to come pick him up. That was as far as his kindness extended. But as Li Wuyan scanned Insiep's call history, his eyes widened. Office, Li Wuyan, office, CEO Kim, office, Chief CHA, office. And Li Wuyan. There was no Jenny. He even checked the contacts list from beginning to end, but it was filled with work-related numbers. The same was true for his text messages, all related to checking Li Wuyan's schedule and wardrobe. It wasn't a normal person's phone. If one looked only at Insiep's phone, his life seemed entirely centered around Li Wuyan. Standing in the street, Li Wuyan's mouth curved upward. He firmly grabbed the shoulder of his abnormal manager. People tend to place special significance on their first memories, first kiss, first love, first heartbreak, etc. For Peter, his first memory of drinking was like that. Growing up under his mother's watchful eye, he couldn't even taste unhealthy foods, let alone alcohol, and had to eat unappetizing organic vegetables. When Jenny handed him a beer can she had hidden under her clothes, Peter felt more excited than worried. Finally, he was going to drink alcohol. It was completely different from the eggnog his grandmother allowed him to sip at Christmas. After much discussion, Peter and Jenny decided to go to the lake to drink. The lake was a 30-minute walk through the woods, ensuring they wouldn't be seen by anyone who might scold or point fingers at them for drinking underage. They promptly executed their plan, telling Peter's parents they were going for a walk. That day, Peter felt better than usual, so they reached the lake quickly. Let's drink here. Wouldn't over there be better? Peter put a lot of effort into choosing the perfect spot to commemorate his first beer. After wandering around for a while, they settled on a flat rock overlooking the lake. Have you ever drunk before? Of course. Jenny, boasting, pulled out the now lukewarm beer can from her clothes. Peter opened the can's tab with his finger. With a fizzing sound, foam rose from the beer. Jenny gestured for him to drink. Peter brought the beer foam to his lips. The taste that flowed down his throat as he inhaled would be unforgettable for years. Or blah. How is it? Jenny, who had tasted alcohol before Peter, showed a relaxed expression. It tastes awful. You're so naive. Nobody drinks alcohol for the taste. Then why drink it? Because it's cool. My dad and mom drink it like it's the most delicious thing ever. Having never tasted beer himself, Peter would get a craving just by looking at beer cans, imagining how good it must be. Peter took another sip of the beer. It's terrible. Jenny burst into laughter. Her laughter startled the sleeping birds in the trees, causing them to flutter away. The trees echoed with their departure. Peter liked Jenny's laughter. Her laughter made him happy too, to the point where he wished she could always be laughing. Want a toast? Jenny asked, lifting her can and wiggling her foot. Her legs, visible under her tattered skirt, were covered in bruises. Asking where she got them or who did it was pointless. Jenny's mother would beat her for the most nonsensical reasons. If there was no reason, she'd create one just to hit her. Jenny often said that when she became an adult, she'd buy the most expensive clothes from the department store and say goodbye to her mother. Peter was also waiting for that day. He had even promised to go with her and help her pick out the clothes. What should we toast to? To the love between me and my prince. Hearing the word prince, the broad shoulders he had seen that day flashed in Peter's mind, causing blood to rush to his face. Peter, are you already drunk? Your face is red. Is it? You're so naive. This is why I can't hang out with kids. Jenny laughed loudly at Peter's pouting lips. Her large frame shook with laughter. Peter wanted to make her laugh as much as possible when she could. Once Jenny sank into her depression, there was nothing Peter could do to help her. Jenny had severe bipolar disorder. She knew it well. But knowing didn't make it any better. Peter almost didn't recognize her the first time he saw her in a depressive state on the street. She wouldn't respond when he spoke to her and wouldn't make eye contact. Worried, Peter went to her house that night for the first time. Debating whether to ring the bell or knock, he heard her crying through the slightly open door. He had never heard such crying before. It was hard to believe it was a human making that sound. Seeing Jenny sprawled on the living room floor, Peter realized the cries were hers. Jenny, who was making bizarre sounds filled with suppressed emotions, suddenly got up and started devouring ice cream. She ate it so voraciously it was hard to tell if she was eating or just shoving it into her mouth. Seeing this, Peter was reminded of Jenny saying she couldn't understand why she kept gaining weight despite eating so little. The sight of her mother cursing and beating her added to his horror. The two of them hurled insults at each other. Peter's face turned pale as he listened to the vulgar language he had never heard before. Unable to speak to Jenny, he returned home. When her depression struck, she wouldn't even go to school. When she emerged from her long tunnel of depression, she'd visit Peter with a cheerful face as if nothing had happened, telling exaggerated stories about her imaginary travels. Jenny would describe the lavish parties and jewels at her Aunt Spencer's house, who was supposedly a millionaire traveling the world. The stories grew more elaborate over time. Peter knew she was making them up, just like he did with his stories. The difference was that Peter knew his stories were fictional and enjoyed imagining them, while Jenny believed her lies as if they were real. Jenny created these stories to escape reality. Peter knew this but didn't want to point it out and hurt her. Did I tell you about the time I locked eyes with the prince in the school cafeteria? I was carrying a tray and he smiled at me. I'm sure he's interested in me. Someday, he'll definitely talk to me. Yeah, I hope so. Don't you have someone you like? No. Why? There are some pretty girls in your class. Peter smiled without saying anything. There were many pretty girls. His father always said all women in the world are like beautiful flowers. Peter thought so too. You're pretty too. Oh my, what should I do? But I already have someone in mind. If things don't work out with the prince, I'll consider it. What? Am I a backup? No, you're my friend. Jenny, who was drinking beer, smiled. Thinking that wasn't enough, she added, You're so important to me, I wouldn't hesitate to give you my heart. You're my precious friend too. So I won't take you away from the prince. Ah, Peter. Sorry. Maybe in the next life. Then I'll make you my number one. Peter leaned back on the rock, supported by his hands. The cool breeze by the lake ruffled his hair. I feel good. Peter mumbled. Jenny, lying next to him, said, Me too. Is this why people drink? Hey, you didn't even finish half a can of beer. What are you talking about? Ha ha ha, is that so? Peter took another sip of the beer. Though the lukewarm carbonation made him frown, the relaxing sensation of the alcohol spreading through his body felt good. Peter, look, a shooting star. Jenny, lying down, tugged at Peter's clothes. Did you make a wish? Of course. To go to the prom with the prince. Ever since she met Philip, Jenny's wish had been the same, to be his prom partner. I'll dance with you too. I won't be graduating then. You can still dance. It's okay. I'll lead. Amused by her generous tone, Peter laughed. He couldn't stop laughing. His chuckles soon turned into hiccups. Are you drunk? Ha 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 hic. Wah ha ha. Oh, poor Peter. She patted Peter's back. Peter also lay down on the rock. He felt even better. You should find someone you like soon. It's not something I can control. Once you set your mind to it, finding someone comes next. You just have to decide. Then it becomes easier. Peter nodded, laughing at Jenny's advice, a master of unrequited love. No one can stop your feelings. Your eyes will follow them first, and when you realize it, it's already too late. Your heart would have gone there first. And then, by the time you realize it, your whole world will be about that person. Ah. Prince. My world is all about the prince. Jenny stretched her arms toward the sky. Peter followed suit, reaching out. The cold wind tickled his fingertips. The world swayed with the breeze. His first experience with alcohol felt amazing until Peter threw up all his dinner that night. Ooh. A terrible pain split his head. It felt as if someone had inserted a tube into his skull while he slept and poured poison inside. Drinking felt good at the time, but the next morning was unbearable. He had learned that early on but hadn't found a way to escape the hangover. Insiep tried to get up. However, his body wouldn't move as he wished. It was because he hadn't refused the drinks the staff offered him yesterday to celebrate his birthday. He wanted to refuse, but in Korea, it was a custom to drink whatever the superior offered in one go, so he had bravely entered every glass handed to him. And yesterday was his official birthday. In Korea, it was customary to accept the birthday punches given by close colleagues as a gift. What was it called again? Birthday what was it? Right. Birthday punches. Yesterday, he got birthday punched. Ooh, my head hurts. Insiep mumbled, pressing his forehead with his palm. He felt thirsty as if all the moisture had been drained from his body but couldn't muster the strength to walk to the fridge. Want some water? Yes. Here. A cup of water appeared above his head. Insiep reached out, took it, and barely managed to sit up. He closed his eyes, savoring the sensation of the cold water spreading through his body. Whoever this is, they are really kind. How did they know I was thirsty? Thank why? As he turned to thank the person handing him the water, Insiep spat it out in shock. The water from his mouth soaked the carpet. Oh dear. Lee Woo-yeon clicked his tongue, looking at the water-stained carpet with concern. Thinking he was still dreaming, Choi Insiep rubbed his eyes a couple of times. Lee Woo-yeon was still standing there, wrapped only in a towel around his waist. Why me? You got drunk and fell asleep on the street last night. Remember? Insiep shook his head with his mouth agape. I couldn't wake you up, so I picked you up before someone else did. So I brought you to my place. It was quite a job carrying you. Carried me. Seeing Insiep's eyes widen in shock, Lee Woo-yeon continued leisurely. You need to gain some weight. It wasn't heavy, but your bony frame made it hard. I'm overwhelmed by shock, Insiep couldn't respond properly. In reality, after deciding to pick up Insiep, all Lee Woo-yeon did was flag down a taxi. The rest was the driver's job, generously tipped for his trouble. I'm sorry. Finally regaining his senses, Insiep bowed his head. He had fled the office to avoid bothering others, only to end up being carried on Lee Woo-yeon's back to this place. This wasn't something a mere apology could resolve. He felt that any moment now, Lee Woo-yeon would say, "You're fired." Sorry, Jenny. All I could do for you was... What are you doing? Yes? Get ready. Did you forget filming starts today? Lee Woo-yeon asked, drying his wet hair with a towel. Insiep, who had been lying on the sofa, jumped up at his words. Though his head was still pounding, he hurried into the bathroom. Get ready quickly, Lee Woo-yeon called kindly from outside. As he stood under the shower, Insiep faced an unreal morning.